Oh, hi. Well, looks like we're back at it again. This is video number 3 out of, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. We got to do some rust removal, and we're going to do that. Hopefully, well, I'm hoping that the base will fit. No. Not going to work. All right. Well, what am I going to do? I had a little bucket set aside, and I seem to have misplaced that. And, shit. All right, so I got me a bucket. We're going to put all of our stuff in the bucket. All the stuff that needs to be derusted. Or derustificated, as they say in the movies. All right. We're going to do the bottom pan. This is going to get lacquered black, and then it'll be covered in felt. Got the base in there. We'll put it all in there at once. And I should have the yolk. Just dump it in as one piece. Just put it all in a little bucket. We're going to do... I'm going to take the struts off the blade. We're going to throw those in there as well. Now these have brass screws, which will have to be dealt with appropriately, but this compound will not affect the brass, so I'm going to leave it all in there as one piece. This is interesting. This is the first one I've ever found that has no paint on it whatsoever. All the paint just naturally left. The only thing on this fan that still has paint on it is the motor, which is really bizarre because the paint in the motor housing is almost completely intact. It's just really strange to see that. Oh, anyway. The fan blade, or the fan shroud, or the blade guard, as you might call it, also suffers from massive rust. But what we're going to do is we're probably going to clean that by hand with steel wool. And then we'll give it a good coat of paint. But these parts here, I mean, the rust will just melt away like it never existed, without any real mechanical work at all. It'll be gone, like it never existed. So that's what I really love about evaporust. It just works, and it's harmless. It doesn't hurt the metal. It'll hurt the finish. I have found that evaporust has properties that will destroy any paint that might still be there. And here's why. The paint might have a little bit of rust underneath, and if there's just even the slightest way for the evaporust to get in there, it will, and it'll tear the paint off the rusted metal, which is kind of a good thing. Really think about it. This is a full gallon. The stuff is reusable. This cost me about 25 bucks. I think the price has gone up on this stuff with everything else, of course. We're just gonna pour it in the bucket. Now, I want to point out there are 2 products available. All right, so this isn't going to fill it up all the way, so we're going to have to play around a bit. That's okay. Reposition some things. That's all right, though. There are 2 products available that remove rust. One of them is made by Rust-Oleum. The other one is Evaporust. They are not the same thing. I learned this the hard way. So the Rust-Oleum product is a liquid just like this, but it has it's acidic. It will eat metal. So Evaporust, I could leave this in the bucket for a month, and when I take I could take it out well, I could take it out tomorrow and everything will come out clean. I could leave it in there for a month and it'll be pretty much the same way. What Evapo-Rust does is, I don't know how it works. Nobody seems to know. It's like the Easter Bunny. Nobody knows. Well, I guess that's a bad analogy. Well, anyway, that's not important right now. What is important, though, is that the stuff won't hurt anything at all. So we don't have to worry about metal dissolving, as happened to me with the Rust-Oleum product. It dissolved a zinc alloy pot metal kind of metal that they used in my old Briggs & Stratton Model A engine. Not good. Just dissolved the thing. So that was a bad day for me, because I had the original part and it just got destroyed. Well, anyways, I'm going to try to reposition some stuff. Maybe we can get this to fully immerse, submerge, immerse, submergible. No, I think we had it right the first time. The stuff works fast, though. I mean, it could be an hour, could be 2 hours, but the point is, it'll be the rust will be gone. I'm gonna put something over this. Maybe I'll put some Saran wrap or something on top of it. I don't want the stuff to evaporate. It will evaporate out, so we don't want that to happen. We'll put that aside. The other thing about Evapo-Rust is the chemical itself can be dumped safely down the drain, according to their own very instructions. It is not hazardous. It is not considered a hazard. However, the contaminants from whatever you're cleaning can contaminate it. So the first thing I need to do is I need to degrease this. I'm going to use oven cleaner because it works really well. Okay, what's next? Well, we got to let this stuff soak for a little bit. And let's see if it's, yeah, it's working. Oh boy, is it working. Yeah, okay. This is going to remove 98 years worth of grime, so then we can better strip the paint. So once you get the oils and the greases off, that exposes the paint so that you can do the next process, which is paint removal. Makes it a lot easier. I actually have to find myself an old toothbrush or something, and I should probably do the gearbox too. All right, we got all the paint removed. Really, that's all the paint that was on this entire fan. That's it. It's gone, just like that. Combination, what I found is that the oven cleaner took the paint off and took the grease away. So, okay, cool. Sometimes it works as a paint stripper. It's not made for that, but sometimes you get good results. This is one of those times. So what I think I'm going to do now is I'm going to start painting. We've got to paint these before they flash rust. And I'm going to do some, we're going to start with the one piece that we don't have to really mask anything on. That's this one here. But I am going to plug the oil reservoir hole as well as the snout of the motor. We don't want paint getting in there. That works. You might be wondering why why is it so low to the ground? Well, if I paint it up high, the overspray will go everywhere, and I don't have a spray booth. Try as I might. It was never really in the budget, so this is how we're going to do it. Alright. So I'm going to try to swing the motor upward so that I can at least get the bottom of it. Nice. Nice. Let's get the edge here up. We've got some pinholing going on. See how bad it becomes. Let's get this up here. Cut that.
Alright, I think I like it. Tilt it this way so I can get a much more even coverage. Screw holes. I'm going to get some paint on my hands. That's okay. It's not going to hurt me. Okay, before we do anything with this, I want to polish the bell because it's accessible and we won't damage any paint by doing this now. So I've already gotten the bottom side of it done. Kind of slowly turn it. I'm sorry, that's just beautiful. Okay, enough of that. I think it's time to give our motor housing another shot of paint. I'm going to show you a little trick. So we've got everything masked off that we don't want painted, except for our little oil port on the rear of the motor housing. Right there, that little ball bearing thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little dab of grease right on that. The paint won't stick to grease, so it'll just wipe right off. Let's see how it works. I'm putting this slug back in. It's already, I mean, it already needs to be dealt with. So any paint that I get on it, it's of no concern to me. So, and we're going to check our screw holes for any leftover buildup and gunk. Just kind of scrape them out. There shouldn't be anything. Now I want to point something out. The casting quality on this fan is very poor. Hold on. I guess I expected more from GE, but take a look over here, here, and here. This is just poor casting. I wonder if I can clean that up. I mean, I shouldn't, but I don't have a file handy that's small enough to get in there. That is how it was casted in 1923, and we're going to leave it alone. But that's just poor quality casting, I guess. Not sure any other way to explain that away, but just very poor casting. You can really still, you can actually see where the casting sand was. It's kind of surprising to see that. We're going to turn our attention to the blades. So I'm going to go ahead and try to strip off
the lacquer. I got 2 blades polished. Alright, let's see how our rusty metal parts look. Ooh. Look at that. Look at that. Huh? That's something. Okay, let's take a look at the base. Aside from this one section that was apparently out of the water, we're going to let that sit in a little bit longer, but we'll put it aside for now. And the struts. The base plate. Look at that. Look at that. I also put the winding key, the gooseneck locking key, wing nut, wing bolt. Put that in there. I think that was it. So I'm going to put this in. We're going to put it in upside down. Let it soak for a little while longer to get that one little section cleaned up. So depending on, if you have one of these, depending on you know, who modified and who maintained it, you may or may not have this steel ring anymore. This one still has it. This is actually to hold the felt into that this seam down here. So I mean, obviously these when they were new, they had felt covering the whole base. What I don't know is if the base is supposed to be painted or not. There is no evidence of paint ever being on this base, but I know that if I don't paint it, it will rust. Kind of a dilemma. What I might do, because I have to glue adhesive on this side, we have a little more disassembly to do. We have to remove all the hardware, set screws and whatnot that go on the hoop or motor mount. This is held on by a pin, and it looks like it might be, nope, it does not look like brass, so that's something. We got to remove all of these little screws and bits and bobbles and pins. Just stick them in this little container so they don't get lost. And this is the gooseneck that has to come out. There's a pin that fell out of there. A little bit of water. This pin I'm not sure what that's actually for. Oh, I see. So that's kind of a... Alright, so that pin gets dropped in when it's at its topmost position, or when it's fully seated. This pin goes in, and it prevents it from ever falling out. It's kind of a locking pin. There we go. I think. Well, anyway, whatever it is, we'll make sure it goes back in. We're going to tape off a few pieces, a few areas, so we don't want to get paint on this. We don't want any paint there, so that gets taped off. We just want to paint the outer edge. We'll have to see how much slop is there, so maybe we can, depending on how much slack. So this is the main motor mount pin that comes out.
These pieces don't get painted. Okay. Now we're going to heat this up and we're going to evaporate any water that might be remaining off. Any moisture. Kind of cook it off. A little bit of heat. And the little nooks and crannies. It helps if you have a dowel that fits in the gooseneck pivot hole. It's like a spit. So after you derust something like this, you don't want to wait too long because it will flash rust. It may have taken it 98 years to get to the point where it was, but it could take 98 minutes for it to go right back to it again once there's no protective oils or paints or any kind of finishes at all left on it. So you really don't want to delay in getting paint on these things. Act today, don't delay. Paint your stuff. I think that's a pretty good paint job. What do you think? It came out all right. Let's see if my little trick worked. Remember early on when we wanted to prevent paint from sticking to the oiler, the little oil port. Let's see if my little trick actually did anything. Not apparently. Oh, yes, it did. It worked. The paint did not adhere. It just created a film that we could just wipe away, just like that. A little bit of grease. Saves a lot of hassle later. I'm sure I'm not the first person to do this. I'm really not that clever, despite what my parents think. But it worked. Look at that. Just a little bit of cleanup here. Now, I opted not to correct a 98-year-old defect when I did this paint job. I could still do it. I could still go back and fix this. It really wouldn't be any sweat off my back. But I would have to strip the paint back off again and redo it. But what I could have done is I could have taken a file and actually... Here, let me show you what I mean. See how those holes, the way they're cast in? That was clearly an error on whoever did the casting, or created the mold, or did the after it was made. They could have gone and filed those down, but they didn't. I've decided I'm going to leave those defects there, to just show the world that 98 years ago, we still had manufacturing flaws. It was still it was a thing even back then, just as it is today. So we're going to leave all that alone. Yeah? Let's take this tape off. Oops. This paint still isn't cured. We want to give it maybe a week before we do any assembly on this guy. And I have to really exercise self-control because I'm really famous for just like, hey, I'm bored. Let's just put it together anyway. And then I get really crappy results. So it's going to take a little bit of self-control on my part to not finish the job prematurely. So we're going to let this sit for a while. But while we're waiting for all that, we can work on the blade. Got to polish the blade set. I've already gone and cleaned up the rotor. Look at this thing. That looks a lot nicer. It was really coated in baked on oil and just nastiness. It was not pretty. I took it to the wire wheel. We cleaned it up. Like I said, you can clearly see how much wear is in the central part of this screw. I mean, it's worn, but it's still good. The spiral is still there. It'll still oscillate. It'll still work just fine. So we cleaned up the shafts, both ends. I cleaned up the, you wouldn't really call this an armature. What the hell would you call this? Rotor, whatever. We cleaned it up. Got all that caked on varnish. This thing is older than the Empire State Building. I mean, this thing is... But, oddly enough, and this is what really blows my mind, it's not as old as Betty White. I mean, come on. That woman won't die. Anyway, she's got to be the oldest human being. Good for her, though. So this is our oil reservoir. I cleaned that out. WD-40 and some of these Q-tips. These are not Q-tips. These are medical grade cotton swabs. And they're great for doing stuff like this. I actually buffed this on the drill. And oh my god, it looks so magnificent. It really does. I just love it. You put another coat on the motor mount, or the hoop, the loop handle, whatever you want to call it, the signature piece. This is why they call these loop handles, because they have handles with loops on them. Anyway, we put another coat of paint on that, and yeah, we're just moving right along. Cleaned up some hardware, took all these pieces over to the wire wheel. Some of the bigger screws I might buff with the drill because they're very prominently visible, so I want to buff those with some metal polish. These are the cage mount screws. I'm missing one of these. If anybody has one, I need one. So I might have a lead on some of those, so I'm going to go look online again, try to buy one or two. So yeah, so we're going to go back to the wire wheel and we're going to clean up a few more bits and pieces. And that's that. I'm going to clean this too. Okay, onward and upward. So we're at that point where, we're just kind of getting a couple odds and ends done. I've got all of my hardware. I've done a rough cleaning with the wire wheel, all the screws, nuts, bolts, everything. Now it's sitting in my ultrasonic tank, which isn't a very good one, by the way. Don't buy the Harbor Freight one. It's a waste of money. But it does better than nothing, so hey. So we're going to go ahead and take the fan Oiler Wick, the front Oiler Wick out. These are not salvageable. I don't know why anybody would try to save one of these. They're junk. 98 years is a long time for one of these things. And we're going to reuse the spring. We have to pull. It's actually folded and pushed into the wick right about here. So we need to pull that out
as best as we can. It just doesn't want to come out. Is it really, though? No, it's just being stubborn. Okay, so it's not folded in. Alright, so we're going to just try to twist this clockwise. Oh, yeah, it was. There it is. There's that. It was kind of hooked into it. Alright, so we're going to just twist this counterclockwise to get it out. Okay. Now we're going to cut our new wick. This is available pretty much anywhere now. I got mine from vintagewireandsupply.com back in 2012 or so. We're going to cut it to about the length of the original one, maybe a little longer. I'm going to need a sharp razor blade. The wick's job is really just to keep the bronze, or I think it's brass in this one, but it's designed to keep oil in contact with that bearing. So we're going to make it a little bit longer than the original. I think this might have shrunk. God, this smells really old. Alright. And we're going to put the new one in. Probably going to clean this up a bit. A little bit of WD-40. Maybe I'll throw this in the sizzle tank. Or just clean it up. It's a little gummy, a little varnishy, but that's not too bad. You know, it's hard, you know, one of the... I just said like 8 things at once. What I find fascinating is working on fans and appliances and whatever it may be, knowing that it was our ancestors who built these things right here in the U.S. It's just crazy. This was somebody's job in the United States at one time to build these old appliances, or what we now refer to as antiques. But it was once somebody's job to build this stuff, and I just like keeping their memories alive. You know, just keep this stuff in operation, keep it functional for generations to come, so that we can show future generations that yes, we once knew how to do things here in the U.S.
So this is B. Bishop. He is cleaning his blades. Ooh.
Okay, so we've got the base interior painted. Now we painted because we don't want it to rust. No one's ever going to see it, but that's not the point. But I was looking, I got the off camera, I got the brass tag off, and here it is. Got it removed, I got it buffed and polished. Oh, look at that. So the trick to that I found from one of the members of the AFCA forum. I'm telling you, these forums are helpful because they got a lot of people there who know their shit. And he told me, I forget who it was, but anyway, he knows who he is. You have to punch the rivets out from the bottom using a drift pin punch. I don't have one small enough to fit in those tiny little holes, but what I do have is a sacrificial small Phillips screwdriver, which I used, and I used a small tack hammer. I didn't use a big heavy hammer. I just went bing, 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 just kept doing it, and the rivets popped out. You don't want to paint the base without removing the tag, because you're going to end up with thick layers of paint around that. It just doesn't look good. It's not a good look. So we're doing it this way. But what I found is after I stripped off all the rust and everything, now this isn't damage from wear and tear. This is actually from the factory. Now what they did at the factory is they would take these, as these were coming out of the sand molds, they would have like a patching crew go through and find defects like this, and they'd fill them in. Now the motor had a couple of those, but they weren't that bad, so I didn't really do anything about it.
Which one am I looking for? I think it was this piece here. You can actually see all the roughness you see in the paint is actually from the casting process. It is not a defect in the paint job. But what you can do, if it's bad enough, you can use glazing and spot putty to fill those in. And I bought some of that today. So this is Bondo glazing and spot putty. This stuff is easy to use. No mixing required, no hardener, nothing. So I like using this when I can because it's easy. And what you do is, I think this is going to be fine. You just kind of pack it in. I've already cleaned the hole out. The thicker it is, the longer it takes to dry, so just keep that in mind. And you might have to go over it, because as it dries, it shrinks. And then you can just kind of skim over the... What those are air bubbles from the casting process. And it's normal. This happens. In fact, if you were to take a brand new car and you were to strip off all the paint, like if the paint just suddenly fell off the car and only the paint, you would find body filler all over the place, because that is what happens during manufacturing. And we're just going to kind of go over the whole thing. This is all going to sand away, and it'll leave the holes filled in. Put a little bit there. I've already got sandpaper ready to go, so the stuff can take a little while to dry. Now, you might be wondering why I painted the inside first. Well, here's why. So, you can paint the inside after, but what happens is you're going to get overspray. Let's say I painted the top side first and made it beautiful, and then I paint the inside. Well, what's going to happen is overspray is going to come out through this hole, It's going to come, it might, you know, spray around the fan and just make a mess. So it's going to ruin a perfectly good paint job. We don't want that. All right, we got the red and tacky, the glazing and spot putty applied where it needs to be applied. And make sure we don't fill in these holes, because we're going to pop those rivets back in place when we're done. We're going to give this a little while, like I said, maybe a couple hours to fully cure. And then it's a hand sanding process from there on out. So when we soaked this in Evapo-Rust, it is not a paint stripper. That is not what Evapo-Rust is, but for whatever reason, it's really effective at it. And it stripped all the paint from the inside completely. It also stripped out any remaining paint that was on the base, which wasn't really, there was no paint left. Who am I kidding? But it also removed the factory applied spot filler. So I don't know what they used, but it's gone. So I've laid out my felt. This is way more felt than we need. So maybe what we'll do is we'll just get a smaller piece cut from that ginormous amount of felt. This bench is starting to get a little messy. But anyway, so I'm going to take me a clean razor blade and cut what I think I need. Maybe a little more than I think I need. That's all I needed. They didn't have... Well, they could have sold me a smaller section of this, but I said, you know what? It's not a lot of money, and I might need this for other stuff. So, you know, green's a popular color, and spring's coming, so just kidding. All right, we're going to do that. We don't need all this. But if I screw up, it's nice to know I have extra, so put that aside. We just need enough felt to be folded in on all corners, and then it gets trimmed on the inside. And I've got the snap ring.
where's my snap ring? It's right here. We got our snap ring. I'm going to go ahead and spray Super 77. This is what I've always used. Now this can's pretty old. I hope it's still good. And we're going to spray the bottom plate, but I'm going to do that over here off camera. We're also going to spray the felt. Alright, so what we want to do is we want to just kind of trim this off a little bit. You'll notice how I did not make sure that's, yeah, that should be enough. What I did not do is I did not paint the bottom of our pan because we want the adhesive directly on the steel. We don't want any possible chemical reactions either now or later with the glue. The scissors are getting gummed up. I probably should have held off on spraying this until after, but this is how I did the last one and it came out pretty good, so. Girlfriend took my scissors, so I'm taking hers. I had a nice pair of Westcott scissors and they're gone. I don't know what she did with them. We might have to switch tactics. I'm going to probably have to use a blade. It's alright. This is probably a little nicer cut anyway. You gotta work fast though, because this stuff will dry prematurely. I don't know what the factory color is. It's either gold or it's green. But the general consensus seems to be green. That's the color I always see these in. For my Vortilex, my 41 Vortilex, I used black. Because that is, I believe, what was on it. I'll have to check back in the video that I made of it and see what was there. So, okay, so now we're going to just kind of fold it inward, like so. You know, there's something for everyone in restoring an antique fan. It could be a family project. You've got arts and crafts, you've got paint work, you've got body work, you've got mechanical work, you've got, you know, metal polishing. Ooh. You've got fun for the whole family. Okay. Now we have the hooks that are no longer exposed, so we need to make some relief cuts in the felt for the hoop hooks. Yeah, I've seen these done. You know, these look really good with gold felt. They really do. They look fantastic with gold felt. I've seen a couple of examples, photos of them anyway. But you know, that's not bad right there. So we got to feel around for those hooks, because we need to expose them so that we can lock our rings into it. Our ring. There's that one. There's one over here. There's one over here. One over here. One over here. Oh, that's just a screw hole. Let's just double check here. Let's see if we can get our ring in there. Did I miss one? Nope. Look at that. So while we're on the subject of polish, so I went ahead and I took all of the hardware, whether it be steel or brass, and I have cleaned and polished every single piece. Everything has been cleaned, everything has been polished. We just haven't really sorted anything yet. So, and I put a nice coat of WD-40 on everything so that it stays clean. I actually cleaned all the hardware in my ultrasonic cleaner. And so all the threads have been cleaned out. For reference, this is what all this shit looked like before. Well, kind of, sort of. That does not go with this thing. Okay. So that's all of our hardware, all of our washers, original split washers, which have a, some of them actually have a textured edge, which I thought was kind of unique. We've got the, I don't know if I got this on video before my battery died, but the rotor has been cleaned and polished. I actually went back and I polished the shafts with some metal polish to give them, well, look at that. Looks brand new. It really does. Once again, I'll mention this. A lot of these old fans, you're going to find holes that have been drilled at an angle, and that is to permit air to move through the rotor for cooling purposes. They're at an angle so that, kind of like how the brake rotor fins in your car are cut at an angle, or they're molded at an angle so that they actually pull the air by creating a suction on one side and induction on the other side. So that's how those rotors stay cool. Alright, so I want to point out something here. See this right here? Oh, no you don't. How about now? See that? That was our gouge. We still need to fill it in a little bit. Of course the stuff shrank, but the rest of the defects are pretty much filled in. We don't really have to worry about this here, or there's another one right here, but I'm going to fill them in anyway. Those will be covered by the base plate, so not a huge concern. But you can see how this can be kind of tedious as you really dive into it. So I'm going to get a small plastic spot putty knife. And just try to kind of evenly apply this stuff. Like that. Probably what I should have done in the first place, but you know. And there's that chip over here. And I gotta mention again, you know, these defects, these chips, these little dimples, and there's some over here. You know, a good coat of primer would pretty much resolve most of this. But I've decided to go with lacquer straight onto the metal, so that's the decision I made, and I'm going to stick to it, damn it. So we're going to let that dry, and then we'll be able to sand it and hopefully paint it. Hours and hours later, these blades were damaged at some point in their lives. I don't know how, but there were some deep scratches in these blades, and I'm not gonna polish them out. I'm just not. Now the fun part, we have to straighten out the grill. So I'm gonna. This thing is massive. I'm sorry. This is huge. It's just big. Giggity. So what we're gonna do is I need to remove the head badge. And I'm gonna get my. Pry it off ever so gently by opening up these fingers. You don't want to scratch it up too bad. I mean, we're going to refinish it anyway, so I'm going to put a rag down. We can probably dispose of this blade. Right. We'll put a rag down just because we don't want to scratch it up any more than we have to. So, little fun little bit of info. So, my first AOU fan back in was it 2009? When I had completely restored. It was one of my first, the first fan restoration I ever did. That I really realized how enjoyable this hobby can be, because you take something that looks like it looks like absolute hell. I mean. That fan looked like it came from hell and was sent here to haunt the living. It was that bad. So somebody took one of these beautiful green with brass blades, beautiful fan, and spray painted it silver. Like, who the hell does that? That's what happened to it. And when I got it from the gentleman who, well, we bartered a little bit. I gave him some labor. He gave me a fan. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm looking at it, and I'm starting to see the beauty in what was there. I mean, you could tell the blades were brass. You could tell it was old. How old? I didn't really know at the time. I believe it was a Form V5. So those of you who are aficionados of the AOU series can pretty much figure out how old that fan is. It's from about 1919 to 1920. I think it could have been either one. Now, if I recall, the oscillator was pot metal. I'm pretty sure it was pot metal. Because I'm thinking back, and I just don't remember it shining up like brass. So I think it had the what they call the trumpet oscillator. This one has the bell oscillator. But if I recall, it had, instead of welded wires on the cage, it was wrapped. I'll have to go back and see. I have dozens of pictures of that fan. I might even throw some into this video so you can see what I'm talking about. But yeah, I mean, who does that, right? Spray painted it silver. This isn't popping. This isn't coming up. There we go. Come on. There we go. Get out of there. Hasn't been removed in 100 years. Yeah, look at that. Look at some of that original green paint right there. So we'll take the, we're going to do something special with this later. So I pointed this out earlier. Oh yeah, we can straighten this out. It's nice and soft. Brass. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Just the way it is. Just the way it is. It's beautiful. But we're going to restore it because that's what we're doing here. But you can tell that there is paint in the background. And I wasn't sure about that. And until I took a closer look. And so now we've got the cage with the badge removed. And I want to try to straighten it out a little bit. Okay, so I screwed the whole cage to the workbench so it's not going to go anywhere. Now, if you're wondering why I put holes in my workbench like that, you got to realize it's a workbench. That's what it was built for. So, a little bit of superficial damage isn't going to hurt anybody. So we're going to go like that. What you don't want to do is start bending shit back and forth. Once you figure out where your bends have to go,
you're going to commit to it. That's where it's going to go. Because if you start bending things back and forth, that's when you get metal fatigue on the welds, and ain't nobody want that. So yeah, this is actually working pretty well. A little too well, if you ask me. This one was bent in a way that is easily fixed. Sometimes you get them to where they're almost flattened or one side is crushed in, and that's just more challenging. It's fixable, but challenging. This is like a skill level 1 right here. Once you get the outer bands kind of lined up with each other, you know, then we can go ahead and start fixing the inner wires and maybe a little more fine tuning. We're gonna have to go back and kind of check a few things out. So this is I think this is the later version, later than the earlier models. I believe before the 1920s, 1919, 18, 17, they actually had wire wrapped at least on one side, and then I think they were welded in the back, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they were kind of a little bit of both. But they weren't welded like this one. So we're getting there. Yeah. If anyone knows of a better way to do this, by all means, I'm open to suggestions. If you have a better plan, better idea, you've done this before, by all means. Let's share the information. This is what I came up with just when I was kind of thinking it over, like how would I best straighten this out, and I figured if I attach it to the bench and use a screwdriver. Fortunately, the wires are vertical on the edges. They're not kinked over, they're not slanted, so that makes this a little bit easier to do. For the most part, I would say we're good. Now let's see if it pretty much lays flat now. And now we can try to get the face wires to be kind of in line with one another. Let's see here. I think we can take our support screws out. We don't really need those anymore. I really like this generation of GE fan guard or blade guard. I think these were very simple. Oh, I'm gonna straighten something else out here. So we're gonna just pop it back in, as so. This particular fan was designed during the Art Nouveau era. The 1930s is known for the Art Deco era, and the 19-teens and early 20s was the Art Nouveau era. And I believe that actually was a little bit longer lived than that, but so the Art Nouveau era involved a lot of designs inspired by nature. So this was probably inspired by a sunburst. You'll find a lot of floral patterns, a lot of floral inspired designs in appliances and woodwork and such. And that was unique. Not unique too, but it was a character of that period. Characteristic, I should say. Let's see here. There's a bit of a kink there. Bend that back. I think we pretty much got it pretty close. Might need a few more fine-tune adjustments here and there, but I mean that will work for sure. That will work. This is by far probably one of the nicest ones I've personally seen for any vintage fan. Almost every fan I get
there's always some major damage to the grill. Well, then again, I'm not buying top-notch antiques either, so, you know, this thing wasn't terribly cheap, but it also wasn't that expensive. I think $100 for what I got was well worth it. You know, the hardest thing right now is to find replacement screws. I'm missing 2 screws out of the whole fan, and one of them is going to cost me $25 freaking because there's only one guy selling them, and he wants $25 for 3. I only need 1. So that really pissed me off, but we'll see what happens. I haven't paid for them yet, so maybe I will, maybe I won't. What really is unfortunate, though, is GE decided to use their own thread pitch. It's not a standard, you know, 1/4-20 or something like that. It's their very own thread pitch. So that really sucks, but such is life. Yeah, look at that. That hasn't been seen by human eye since 1923. I'm crazy. Yeah. 1923. Look at that. That'll get painted. We're gonna paint this. It's steel. It gets painted. I might go this way a little bit. Gotta pull it into submission there. I'd say that's pretty good. I'd say that's pretty straight. So now we have to evapor-rust this poor thing. So that's going to happen off camera. This will be it for this video. In our next video, we're going to do some wiring. We might even start doing some assembly. So we're definitely going to do wiring in the next video, and we may do a little bit of assembly. We may complete the fan in the next video. Who knows? But until then, folks, you have a great one. I almost gave up trying to find a container that would fit the fan blade guard. But here we are. This is a concrete mixing tub that I bought to do some concrete work. And it just happens to be the only object on this lot that will hold liquid and that fan blade guard. So that's what that's all about. We're going to let that sit overnight, and then in the morning I'll flip it over and we'll do the back part of the rim. So that's it, and we'll just let it do its thing. If I had another gallon or so of liquid, I could probably do a better job, but this is what I got.